Hey everybody, Alex Cohen here.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani.
And once again, a whole lot to chew on this edition of the Inside the Issues podcast. We are going to tell you about a little meeting of the minds that Mayor Bass had at City Hall this week to talk once again about homelessness, but in a kind of different way.
And some new polls out on not only President Trump, but also the hot Senate race that's heating up here in California.
And we have got a huge story to talk about with hot labor summer. It is continuing. It just never stops. It's going to be hot labor fall, which doesn't have quite the same ring. But we're going to talk about some developments on that front. But let's start off, Sara, talking about this meeting that happened this week at City Hall. We've talked over and over and over again about how Karen Bass, one, has said homelessness is her top priority. Two, that she's going to lock arms with everybody and locking arms with the city council, locking arms with the county board of supervisors. It's like Ganesh.
How many arms do you have? Yeah.
Right? Also locking arms with some of the local mayors here in LA County, right? Because when it comes to homelessness, it's not as if it stops on a city line. So she had a whole bunch of different mayors, I believe, Sierra Madre, West Covina, a bunch of other places, some city council members, county supervisors who all gathered to meet with Tom Perez, who is worn a million and one different hats
the
in
comeback
his life.
kid, Tom
the
Perez.
comeback kid, right? You've known him since forever.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I know him well, but I've met him back in the day. In the day when he was back in the DOJ under Obama, heading up civil rights. He used to come talk to all of the civil rights groups when I was doing civil rights and social justice advocacy, and then he onward to the labor secretary, and I don't know what else. DCCC.
Yes, no, his
a bazillion hats.
He's a bazillion hats.
Yeah.
His current title is Senior Advisor and Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. But basically, he comes as a spokesperson for the White House to meet with Mayor Bass, to meet with all these other local mayors and local officials to talk about, okay, what can we do together when it comes to homelessness? We've talked about before how earlier this year the Biden administration talked about their All Inside initiative, where they're partnering with 6 places. Most of them are cities. One of them is LA, but also the whole state of California counts because clearly we're such an epicenter to this. And so it was interesting. I thought that there might have been some like big announcement of, and today we're saying that the Biden administration is going to do this. It wasn't that kind of thing.
I'm waiting for the $100 million or something extravagant.
Yes, the big check. No, this was more ideological. And I think that there's a certain, well, before you wah with your sad trombones, let's take a listen to what Tom Perez had to say about, he said, look, President Biden knows that, like, we are in the fight for our democracy, but the guy's super chipper. He's super optimistic, and so am I. Check it out.
I am confident that when the world descends on Los Angeles in 2028, Los Angeles will be touted as a model of how to tackle tough challenges, a model of our nation's remarkable quilt of diversity, a city that embraces our diversity, a city and a county that, if it were its own country, would be something like 20th in the world in GDP.
All right, so Sara, let's go straight to our What's the Word this week. What's the word?
It's the feds.
The feds. Dun, 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 right? And you hear that, I don't know, for me, the feds, kind of, it's G-men back in the day, right? Like the guys in suits and hats who come in.
A gray suit like this one.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's why we're wearing our jackets this week. But, in this case, the feds, I think, the takeaway, I think, from this, the vibe from this is, sure, we all operate on our different levels, but what could happen when we come together and, I don't know, maybe I was reading too much into it. His enthusiasm made me feel like he came here to be kind of a cheerleader for LA. Like LA, you've got Karen Bass rattling off the numbers again today: 40,000 unhoused in the city of LA, 70,000 in the county. And if you think about that, that's probably the entire run of Beyonce, right? No, seriously, you come out to SoFi Stadium, and if you just picture how many people that is, I don't know about you, I'm the one who's like, la, 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 la. I'm going to bury my head in the sand because it's too much to think about. But I think what he was saying is look, we can and will get through this, and we can only do it
together. Locking arms.
Locking arms. With the feds.
Okay, and I appreciate the locking arms, but I've been hearing that message for quite a while now, and I'm ready to see what's that going to look like? Show me that I'm the policy wonk. So show me what is the policy here that's exactly moving forward. And I think things have been coming down the pike, but these are also opportunities where we could be getting a little bit more specific about what exactly it is that the federal government's going to be locking arms with the city on. And I agree, right? I mean, we have numerous layers of governance. This is Poli-Sci 101 for all the students out there, right? And we have our federalist system, all of these varying layers of governance having to work together. Certainly when we see issues like homelessness, this is where the rubber meets the road, because one city does one thing, it doesn't matter, because folks will just move over to another side. We've talked about that from one council district to another. We've talked about from LA to Sierra Madre, right? Or other cities that might be out there. So I agree, correct. And Mayor Bass certainly on the campaign trail said, I'm coming from the federal government, so I'm going to bring all of these contacts in. But let's see, like, what is this going to get us?
Well, it's interesting. Tom Perez actually talked about that today, and he said, I think I know what I hear when I hear like federal government resources, money, right?
Yeah,
like everything's money, and money is
right.
totally important. But he said, look, it's not just about money. It's about expertise, and sometimes it's legalities, right?
Sure.
Like I think there's a really interesting parallel that's happening right now. I'm going to go off a little path.
Yeah,
here.
please.
Stay with me, Sarah.
I love your path.
Because, everyone always says LA, New York, we're so alike. We're these big cities on either coast. But right now, politically speaking, when it comes to relationships with the federal government, these two cities and these two states couldn't be more different. Here in California, Gavin Newsom, going out there on the road for Biden.
Yes.
Mayor Bass, like locking arms with him, being like, okay, we're working with you, we're working with us, we're all on the same team. Go Democrats, go. Meanwhile, in New York, it's the absolute opposite. You've got New York Mayor Eric Adams, who's so livid about the situation with immigrants there, upwards of 100,000 people. He has put that flat at, the steps of the Biden White House. Kathy Hochul, the government there,
has really kind of taken an aggressive approach to the Biden administration.
And they've said to them, like, look, I'm sure they do want money, and Eric Adams has talked about that, but they also said, look, let these people work, right? Because you've got all these people standing around just like literally counting the hours going by. They're like, we need people to fill jobs. TPS with temporary protected status. Like the Biden administration could do the thing that allows these people to work more readily. Biden administration coming back and saying, well, New York, that might be great for you, right? For our border states, if we do that, it could be a total nightmare because you can have even more people coming in. So it becomes complicated. But I think it's so interesting that you see in New York, and Democrats are worried about this on the cusp of an election year. You've got the mayor and the governor of this blue state kind of angry and irate with Biden. Like, that's not a good optic at all for the president. But here on the West Coast, when it comes to the feds, we've got this much more.
We've got this loving relationship.
Yeah. I also, the other thing that's interesting to me about this, Sarah, maybe there's a parallel in academia. You tell me. But I know in the world of journalism, there's often like a lot of people start their careers on the local level, in broadcast, right, at the local station, the local paper. And then the dream is you go up to national. Like someday I want to be on CNN or someday I want to be in NPR. It's right. Sarah just got a new fellowship at Harvard. We're very excited about that. Check the show notes. But that sometimes it goes but every now and then it goes the other way around. And I think, that Karen Bass came from this position in Congress, came at one point from being on the short list for being the VP and comes back to LA. Tom Perez mentioned he took over the position of labor secretary from Hilda Solis.
Yes,
she used to be a labor secretary. Like she came from that level back. And there's something about it when you do come back to the local level, you do bring back some of that like
gravitas, expertise, connections, experience, all of it. I think that's right. And I think we tend to see that in LA politics because especially county, and I think we've talked about this before, county supervisor, that's a good gig.
Right.
Mayor of LA, good gig, right? Like these are even city council, right? These are very well-paying jobs. You don't have to schlep yourself to DC all the time. And you can do really good local work. Whereas, in Congress, for example, hands are tied often and very little actually gets done.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree. I think one other final element is I love to see the locking arms with federal government. I am excited to see what happens. Of course, we've already seen some shifts and changes in terms of policy coming from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But I think the one thing in the back of my mind, and this kind of plays into our next piece that we're going to talk about in the new polling here in California, but just maybe what happens if Biden doesn't end up being president in 2024?
Yeah.
What will all of this locking arms today mean for the future, right? So if we're going to lock arms now, is it something that can be put in place and solidified so that it is not dependent upon the outcome of the next election?
Yeah, no, I think it's so funny as you were talking at this visualization. Sometimes when in documentaries they have pictures of two people and then one person just disappears. They Photoshop them out. I literally pictured as you were talking Karen Bass with Joe Biden. And then what if Joe Biden just disappears? And you're right, because if Donald Trump is elected, everything that you're building up with the Biden administration, I guarantee you that'll be gone in a heartbeat. Right. There's actually a group working right now. It's super interesting. There's a recent LA Times piece about this this group that realized when Donald Trump was elected the first time, he wasn't expecting to win. So he was remember that? Remember how long it took for him to be up and running?
He had no clue what he was doing because he didn't think he was going to win.
No, and there's other people he hired one minute and fired the next. And Politico had this list that was 70 people deep. So now there's all these conservatives out there who are we're hiring people, we're recruiting people. I think it was the Iowa State Fair saying, if Trump wins, come to work the very first day. So I think you're right.
We need folks because all the old guys are in jail already.
Well, that is true too. That is true too. Yeah. So staying with the feds and the federal government, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned some of the polling numbers on Donald Trump. Yeah. What do we got?
Right. New out from the Los Angeles Times partnership with IGS over at Berkeley, showing that Trump now has a lead amongst likely Republican voters for the March 5th primary. 55% of those voters say they want Trump. This is up from 44% 3 months ago, and you can see Trump is really pulling into some of the gains that DeSantis had made, and folks are doubling down on their support for Donald Trump as more and more cases launch against him. And we've certainly talked about some of those in Georgia and all of the folks that were a part of that and named in that case. Support for him continues to rise.
It is really remarkable, and this matters, right? And now we've got California's presidential primary on March 5th, which is the day after one of his many legal dates. I honestly can't even remember right now.
We need a special calendar.
I know,
we
do.
Trump's court dates.
But can you imagine, the boost? If this is how people have been reacting in previous indictments, this could be an even bigger bounce for him. And now with California's new GOP rules, if he takes the March primary, that's it. He gets all of the delegates, which is 196, I believe, which is the most of any. And I hope my numbers are right here. I believe that if he wins all of those California delegates, that gets him 14% of the way to his nomination, just here in California.
Just in the Golden State.
Wowzers,
right? And I think people forget about the importance of those primary elections. We often think, California, of course, it's a blue state. It's going to go to Biden. Yeah, it probably will in the general election. But there's other steps along that road. And I think that's what you're pointing to here is that Trump doing well in California on that March 5th primary can still serve to put him in the general election. I mean, even if he's in prison, at that point, or still on trial, or trials ongoing.
Phenomenal momentum.
Right, exactly. It poses so many questions to kind of the future of what will be.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think a really fascinating kind of turn. And as we've talked about, upcoming here, California is going to be ground zero for the Republican Party with the convention coming up, debates coming up. So certainly we're going to see a whole lot of GOP primary action coming up just in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. There's another Berkeley IGS poll out this week looking at another big race that'll happen in March. Our primary will also be the determinant of who is going to be running in the general election for Senator Dianne Feinstein's seat. Sarah, want to walk us through some of the interesting numbers there?
Exactly. So Ben Oresky's over at the LA Times reporting on this new poll showing Adam Schiff in the lead. A slight lead, but a lead nonetheless over Katie Porter, with Barbara Lee trailing behind. I think it's 7% it was. So this is certainly showing some momentum for Schiff. In the past, we've really seen Schiff and Porter kind of neck and neck. As we've discussed before, Barbara Lee kind of lags behind both in name recognition across the state. Of course, she's a longtime member from the Bay Area, but less well known perhaps in Southern California, and certainly lagging behind also in fundraising dollars, which in a huge Senate race in the state of California, we got 40 million people, some of the most expensive media markets in America. Money counts.
It does.
And money matters. Yeah.
I forgot to tell you, I got a little hot goss. Guess what's happening this week? What? Friday afternoon, right here in Southern California, there was a gun violence event featuring Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee.
Oh, get out.
It's true. I forgot to tell you that today.
Oh, they just happened to stop in at this event.
So, yeah, no, they're all going to be there, which I actually think is really interesting.
Are you going to be there?
The feds. I'm going to give it a shot. Okay. I'm going to actually be on the road to the central part of the state to celebrate my best buddy's 50th birthday.
Good.
But I'm kind of like, how can I teleport myself? Because I really want to be at that event to see what happens, because it actually sends a really powerful message. I think if you've got three people who are like in bitter competition with each other saying, we are all united on this federal front as Congress members for ways to curb gun violence, I can't help but wonder what each of them, like, I'm the coordinator of that event.
Yeah.
Just put myself in their shoes for a minute where you're like, okay, guys, I know you're all competing against each other. You could use this as an opportunity to say, I did so-and-so.
Right.
And because they've all done things on gun violence. I just can't wait to watch this and see, are they going to have like this little, Sarah and I have been working together for a long time.
Are they going to be locking
Sarah
arms?
did, like, is it going to be one of those moments, right, of the exact opposite of locking arms?
Well, and it's so
wait
complicated because these three candidates, they are all distinct, but they're all Democrats. They've all served in Congress. They have some unique positions, but largely agree on most policy topics. So how do they distinguish themselves in this election that in which they're all giving up their current jobs, right? We're losing 3 members of Congress from the California congressional delegation, with all of them running, and so that's huge, right? And they're not terribly different from one another on the policy side of things. Obviously, their personalities and their histories and backgrounds, of course, and stories are all very different.
Another issue that I think all three would probably see relatively eye to eye on is on labor. We've seen all of them on the picket lines in various events.
This weekend for Labor Day.
Yes, big campaign opportunity. This week we also saw Joe Biden coming out and talking about the dock workers contract agreement that was recently reached between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union and the Pacific Maritime Association. This covers the West Coast ports. I believe it's something like nearly 30 of them. And so Joe Biden was talking about it this week a little bit, and it was, I don't know, it felt a little bit like, shouldn't this have happened on Labor Day? I can't remember what he was doing then. Right. But he talked about the fact of like, this is what can happen when we all work things out and everything works out great in the end. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
This contract proves that collective bargaining works. It gives workers a seat at the table and ensures that their well-being, security, and futures are a priority. And it also gives employers the opportunity. It delivers for employers by helping them attract and retain the best, most productive workers in the world. Yes, it often takes time, but done right, collective bargaining means everyone wins.
I got to say the word that came to mind here for me was low-hanging fruit, right? Like the dock workers, that would have been really bad if they didn't reach a contract.
Well, and we have had issues in the past at the ports where there's products sitting out there on the water, cannot come in. So for sure, this is a super important one. These are the largest ports in the
and they're worried about there's
world.
this like tension between going green and having automated systems there, but then you put the dock workers out of work. So
it's
it wasn't
super complex, actually.
Super complex.
But they've been at it for the last year.
And they worked it out, and Joe Biden made it seem like all you need to do is sit at the table and everything's fine. Tell that to Hollywood, Mr. President.
Or the hotel workers.
Or the hotel workers, right? Because seriously, no end in sight with those work stoppages. And I think we're really beginning to see how scary that can be for a lot of people whose livelihoods depend on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have been talking many times on this podcast about the hot labor summer that continues. Actually, over Labor Day weekend, the APSA conference had happened of the American Political Science Association. Numerous headlines about it, NPR covering it. I think there was something I want to say in The Atlantic, I think even written about it. I mean, there were numerous articles about the fact that APSA, the leadership of my professional society, encouraged people to cross picket lines. It was really problematic.
Yeah, and then the union said the only amenities you're going to get are like dirty rooms and loud picketers.
Exactly. And so picketers were outside early in the morning, as we've seen at other places throughout the city and county over the weekend, right? Because it's Labor Day weekend, and there were still some political scientists who came for the conference. And to their credit, they did move a lot of it out of the hotels, but folks flying in still, of course, had to stay somewhere. So it was a super complicated situation. And I think, when we hear Biden talking in this case about the dock workers who have been at it for this year, and absolutely, I think it's right. We should celebrate that. However, you can't help but feel like, whoa, wait, we have all these other labor issues going on. UAW, United Auto Workers, are poised to potentially strike starting next week. Their contract is up. So there's ongoing labor issues that need attention. And I couldn't help but think in this yay, hooray for this contract about who's missing from this press conference. We don't have a labor secretary.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, like, the dock workers, they were missing too.
Yes.
And a labor secretary because why, Sarah,
would maybe
remind us?
help. Because remember, currently we have an acting labor secretary, California's own Julie Su, who has been nominated to this position, but for whom Republicans have said, even though they approved her to be the undersecretary, deputy labor secretary some months ago, they've now said she is unfit to serve as labor secretary in the cabinet of the Biden administration. And so she is just in limbo forever and with no end in sight to this. And it seems like Biden has accepted that. They are calling her Biden's forever nominee.
BFN.
Yes.
Not BFF.
No, exactly. The forever nominee who, the Republicans in the Senate have just decided they are not going to advance this, the candidacy of Julie Su to be labor secretary.
But you know who Julie Su is? Julie Su is Julie Su. And that same cannot necessarily be said of all politicians and aspiring politicians.
This is
one of my favorite stories, not just of the week, but probably just of ever. There is a gentleman named Kevin Sabelica. He's running for office. He announced this week he wants to be on the Carlsbad City Council. Had a great message. However, the message that went out with the picture of Nathan Fletcher.
Who was his boss? He was working for Nathan Fletcher.
Sure. Both white guys.
Awkward.
Sure. But soup's awkward considering that Nathan Fletcher was a San Diego supervisor who was running for state senate and then suspended his campaign when he was named in a sexual harassment and assault lawsuit.
Well, and I
is
think
ongoing.
One additional piece of information to this, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it that this happened a couple months ago? Wasn't it that he suspended his campaign and checked himself into some sort of rehab? The day before it comes out that he has
also
been
true.
named
That
in
is
a
also
sexual
true.
harassment
And is
lawsuit.
also the husband of Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, who's now the big labor boss lady, used to be in the state legislature. I feel like there's all these overlapping themes happening this week. Kevin Sabellico, I want to say, had a remarkable sense of humor about it. Can you even imagine you're running for office? I just want to know how dude found out, right? One of his friends is like, Kevin. Yeah. We need to talk about Kevin. Maybe that's the name of this episode. I felt really, really bad. He had a great sense of humor about it, making jokes.
Right. At least I don't have to pay the text message folks.
I thought that was brilliant.
Very brilliant. I did feel bad for the poor guy. I haven't met either of them, but looking at his picture, Kevin Sabellico looks like a good policy guy. He's got his glasses on. He looks like a super smart guy. He's been a campaign guy
Doesn't
for a
really
long
look too
time.
much like Nathan Fletcher.
The picture of Nathan Fletcher, he looked like he should be out on a yacht somewhere. He's got his hair all coiffed, and I thought, oh wow, I don't know, maybe that'll help you out. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know, and maybe you get political points for humility and being self-deprecating.
I hope so.
You know, if you are the one who's not caught up in the scandal, but it's something like that, maybe somehow you work that to your advantage. Maybe who knows? But Kevin Sabellico, we see you. We know who you are. You are, in fact, Kevin Sabellico. And I'm Alex Cohen. I'm on the social media channels at Alex Cohen in LA.
And I'm Sara Sadhwani at Sara Sadhwani.
And we will see you here next week. The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.